going to take a very brief look at drum heads in this video. There is a wide variety of drum heads out on the market and several excellent manufacturers of quality drum heads. But basically it comes down to your choice between the coated drum head like this one and the clear drum head like this one. And also to your choice on the thickness of the drum head as well. If you choose a 1-ply or a thin drum head, you'll generally have a more open sound with more overtones, and the drum will sound a little more ringy. Now if you choose a 2-ply drum head or something thicker than that, you're going to have a more muffled sound and less overtones. Now I generally prefer to use the coated drum head because I like the way the sticks and brushes sound on the coated drum head. Also, the coating adds a little bit of extra thickness to the drum head to help control those overtones. Now, when you're replacing the bottom head on your snare drum, you want to make sure that you get the right drum head for that function. And usually the bottom head of the snare drum is a very thin drum head, like this one here that I have in my left hand. I'm not sure that you can see very well in the video, but this drum head is very thin. And you want to make sure that, again, when you are replacing that bottom head of the snare, you get the proper drum head for that function. It'll help make your snare drum sound the way it should. Now remember that choosing drum heads is really a personal choice, and with time and experimentation, you'll find the right drum heads that best fit your playing style and the sound that you're looking for out of your drums. Also, like drumsticks and like drums, you can check out the leading manufacturers of drum heads on the internet for more information. Electronic drums are a lot of fun, and they can be great when you live in a small environment like an apartment, for instance. They're also great when the volume of acoustic drums could bother neighbors or even parents, for that matter. There are a lot of electronic drums out there and different pad setups, but if you have a serious drum student, you're probably going to be looking at a setup similar to this that's really meant to imitate or copy the acoustic drum set, with a snare drum, tom-toms, and cymbals that are all electronically triggered. Now this particular setup came with a hi-hat pedal, and I had to provide my own bass drum pedal for this setup. And different setups will have different modules and different ways of triggering the sounds. Sometimes the hi-hat pedal will be simply a foot switch. I would kind of recommend staying away from that and trying to get something that's as close to the acoustic drum set as you can. Now the module in this particular unit is great because it has a built-in metronome, and it also has the ability to record your performance, which is really fun too. So I'm going to have a little bit of fun here, and I'll see you guys in the next segment. Your drum set probably won't need a lot of maintenance other than the obvious things like a broken drum head or something like that. But there are a few things that you should keep on your maintenance checklist, and the first thing I can think of are the cymbal sleeves. We really want to make sure that we're avoiding any metal-to-metal contact between the center hole of the cymbal and the post of the cymbal stand. So periodically get in there and check those cymbal sleeves and make sure they're not wearing out. And if they are, get those replaced as soon as you can, because any metal-to-metal contact between the center hole of the cymbal and the post of the cymbal stand could cause that center hole to become out of round, and then the cymbal's not going to sit properly on the cymbal stand. It can also cause the cymbal to crack near the center hole as well. You also want to make sure you check the felts as well, because they can become compressed, and over time, if they get kind of old, they're not really protecting the cymbal as well as they could. So you might want to replace the felts every once in a while as well. Okay, you also want to make sure that you're keeping the cymbals loose on the stand, as I said before in the other section when we were talking about cymbals, because you want to avoid cracking, and you really want to try to take care of your cymbals as best you can. Also, keeping all the moving parts of your drum set well lubricated and oiled, and if you hear anything squeaking, that's usually a sure sign that something's in need of attention. We usually get things squeaking from the bass drum pedal or the hi-hat pedal, or maybe even the seat. So you want to keep that in mind. If you hear anything squeaking, that's probably something that needs attention there. Also, don't over tighten things in terms of the mounting system, like the tom-tom mount, or on the cymbal stands and the different joints where you have wing nuts and screws, because you could strip stuff out when you do that. Of course, you want to make sure that things are secure and they're not going to fall or move around too much when you're playing on the drums, but you don't want to over tighten either. Of course, you're going to have to replace your drum heads when you can't really tune the drum very well anymore. The drum heads have become overstretched, and if they have dimples in them or wrinkles, or if they crack or break, of course you'll have to replace them then as well. Be extra careful again of the bottom head of the snare drum and the snare wires, and in another video we'll talk about changing drum heads and how to seat the drum head properly on the shell and how to get the drum tuned up, and we'll also talk about replacing the snare wires and getting that all fitted in properly as well on another video. Also too, I don't really clean my cymbals at all, but a lot of people like to clean the cymbals. Just be aware that if you do that, you really want to make sure that you put something underneath the cymbals, because it's going to get very dirty around the edge of the cymbal, and if you just do it on the floor on a rug or something like that, it's going to damage and ruin the rug. So you definitely want to make sure you have a couple of layers of rags or something underneath the cymbal, because you're going to get a lot of residue off of the cymbal if you do clean them, and a lot of it will come around the edge of the cymbal. A couple of times a year, I'll take the drum heads off the shells and clean out all the dirt and dust that kind of gets in between the rims and the drum shells and the drum head, just to make sure that I'm able to tune the drums properly and that the drum heads are able to move kind of on the drum shell when I'm tuning it. They're not getting stuck in there because there's so much grime and dirt, in between the shell and the drum head. So a few things just keep in mind. Make sure, again, you're checking those cymbal sleeves. That's a really important thing. And anything that's kind of squeaking or seems funny or, doesn't seem to be working right, obviously you're going to have to check on that. And if you have any problems with things, you can always take it down to your local drum shop or music store, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you out with fixing things as problems arise. So in this part of the video, we're going to take a brief look at the woods and materials that drums are made out of. But I just wanted to say that, remember, this is a basic and introductory video for beginning drum students, and it's really beyond the scope of this video for me to be able to cover all of the woods and materials that drums are made out of. There are just simply too many. So I'm going to just talk about some of the basic ones and the things to look for when you're trying to make that decision between buying a new and a used drum set. There are several ways of making drum shells out of wood. One is the solid wood drum shell, which is simply a ring or a shell that is carved out of a tree. And this is a drum shell that will have no seams in it at all. Then you have the bent solid drum shell, which is a long plank that is fairly thick, and it has been softened and bent into a circle. And of course you'll have a seam where the two ends meet to form the circle. Then you have the stave construction, which are several smaller pieces of wood that have been cut at angles so that they'll create a circle, and they're glued together vertically like this. And then, of course, the shell is sanded down to the proper size. Or you could have the segmented drum shell, which is similar to the staved method, but it's done horizontally, where you have sections of the drum glued together this way and fitting around into the circle eventually. But really, most of the drum shells that are out on the market today are made out of plywood or several plies of thinner wood. And this is great because you can get great strength out of plywood by combining several plies and also offsetting the seams. And you can also order the thickness of the drum shell in terms of the number of plies you want. You can have extra reinforcement rings or hoops inside the drum shell, so it gives you a lot of different variety to choose from in terms of the shell construction. Also, on the outside of the shell, you could have a veneer on the outside that is, say, a very expensive wood, and get a very nice finishing look on the outside of your drum without the expense of making a solid shell out of a very expensive piece of wood. You can also do wraps and other veneers that give custom finishes like pearl finishes or sparkle finishes or striped finishes, or just there's a huge variety of different types of finishes you can get on the plywood shells. So most of the shells you're going to see out there are probably made out of a plywood, and you can see the plies when you look down through a clear drum head, or if the drum heads are off, you can certainly see the plies when you look at the bearing edge. Okay, so running down the woods and materials for drum shells real quick. First off, we have maple. And maple is really popular because of its attack and its warm tone. And also there is a very popular manufacturer of drum shells that uses almost exclusively maple in creating their drum shells. So maple is widely used for drum shells. Then we have birch, and birch is a very dense, close-grained, hard wood, so you're going to get a lot of attack and a lot of strength out of birch drums, but you might not get quite the warmth that you might get out of like maple drums. Okay. Then you have mahogany, and you're getting into wood that is a little bit softer. You're looking at a warmer tone, closer to a maple drum shell sound. Then you have other woods that are used in making kind of budget drum shells. Things like basswood and luan and other different woods and materials. There's a huge variety of them, I'm sure, that they use to make budget drum shells out of. And then we can look at things like acrylic drum shells. And these were made popular by the drummer John Bonham in the band Led Zeppelin. If you go Google him, you can see what his acrylic drums look like. And you can color acrylic as well, and it sort of has this see-through look. And you can have different tints and different colors in the acrylic, so they're very interesting to look at. And they have generally a very dry and punchy sound to them, and they're not affected by humidity like the wood drums would be. So oftentimes if you have wood drums in different climates, they'll warp a little bit, or the wood will expand and contract a little, and something like acrylic won't do that. And then of course you can use metal to make drums, and a lot of snare drums are made out of metal. Generally you don't have tom-toms and bass drums made out of metal. But I've also seen drums made out of fiberglass and, again, a whole host of other materials. One thing to keep in mind, though, when you're looking for drum sets, if you see something that says this is a shell pack, that generally means that you're only going to be getting just the drums. There's no hardware involved in that particular offer. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about whether or not to buy a new or a used drum set. And this a lot of times can come down to, of course, the budget that's involved. Do we have the money to spend on a brand new drum set? And sometimes these drum sets can be rather pricey when you get into the shells and the hardware and the cymbals and everything else. Also, I would kind of take a look at the student and see what the level of commitment the student has to drumming. Are they practicing regularly? Are they interested in drumming? Are they looking at drum videos online? Are they, going down to the local drum shop and talking to the guys down there and getting involved in learning more and more about drumming and things like that? So you can see the enthusiasm, the commitment, the dedication to practicing and things like that. And that will help you decide whether or not maybe to go with a new drum set. But if you do look at going with a used set, there are a few things that you do want to keep in mind. And a lot of times when people go to look at used drum sets, one of the things that throws them off is that they look at the drum heads themselves. And you want to remember that the drum heads can be replaced, and they're fairly affordable. So when you go to look at a drum set and you see drum heads that are cracked or broken or look really bad, don't worry about that too much. What you really want to look at is the drum shell itself. You really want to check out the wood of the drum shell and then the hardware and make sure that the hardware is functional as well. So as far as the shell of the drums go, you want to make sure that the bearing edge, which is right inside the rim of the drum, is nice and smooth as you run your finger all the way around just inside the rim of the drum here. You want to make sure that's nice and smooth. It's not going up and down and you're not feeling, splinters or cracks or weird things right in there. So that's one thing. And then if you could take one of the drum heads off and check the inside of the shell, that would be really great too. And you want to look for cracking, and you want to make sure that the drum hasn't been affected by moisture in any way. You want to make sure that the glue in the laminates or in the plies hasn't started to pull away. And sometimes you can even see this on the outside of the drum if the drum has a wrap on it or if it has a laminate on the outside. You want to look for the seam and make sure that the seam is intact and that it's not starting to pull apart on you. Okay? So really inspect the shell for water damage, for moisture damage, for cracking and things like that, because things like the drum skins, they can be replaced. Now, as far as the hardware goes, you really want to make sure that all the hardware is functional. Take a cymbal stand and loosen it and raise it up and down and retighten it in different spots. Make sure you can move everything at all the joints. Play the drums. Make sure that the pedals work and that the springs are there. And that you can move the tom-toms. Loosen the tom-tom mount and move the tom-toms around and things like that, so that you can make sure that all of the hardware is functional and you don't have things that are stripped out or missing. And that's another thing, kind of look for things that might be missing, like a spot where, well, it looks like there's something should be in there, like a tension rod, or a screw is missing that's holding something on and something just doesn't look right. So hopefully this video has been able to give you enough information in terms of the components of the drum set so that when you go to look at used drums, it'll help you to be able to tell whether or not there are things missing and things aren't working right, or it just doesn't look like everything's together. Also, don't forget the PDF, companion PDF that goes with this video that you can download, and it has all of this information on there for you as well, or most of the information on there. And you can go down to the local drum shop and talk to those people down there. Maybe check out drums down there. Ask those guys what to look for and things. They'll be happy to help you out. And also look at other videos online and check out different things on the internet. Go to the leading drum manufacturers and check out their websites and see the different pieces and parts. So if you go to look at that particular model, you'll know what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to function. So I hope I've helped you out a lot with this. Good luck out there looking for drums, and I hope you find just the right thing for you. Okay, everybody, if you made it this far in the video, congratulations, and thanks for hanging in with me this long. I know this video was rather lengthy, and hopefully there was a lot of information on there that helped you out. Certainly, if you have any comments or suggestions, I'd be really interested in hearing from you. You can contact me through my website, deangiles.com, DeanGiles.com. And certainly, if you have any questions or further questions on this material, feel free to send me off an email, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. So, thanks again for watching, and look for other videos coming up soon, and I'll see you next time.